was kind of digging around a little bit and thinking about, what can we do with everything that's been going on and stirring around in our congregation that is moving in a direction that is very difficult to move toward. And the church is evolving, and that's exciting times for folks. But it's also very challenging times for us. And if it's something that we know and have always relied on, we feel like something is being taken from us, when in all actuality is that we're learning how to share it more efficiently, effectively, so people can find and experience the things that we find to be very satisfying and gratifying. And so it is evolving, and that's the exciting part, because we are a part of that. We are a very, very big part of that, and we get to be a big part of that, and that's nothing but good that can come from this. And so we're going to talk a little bit about it. And I was digging through some old files, and I very rarely do this, and that is preach an old sermon. The first sermon I ever wrote was called A Child of God. I think I preached it 3 times, and that was the only sermon I ever repeated. And so I was looking back 2 years ago, almost to this day, and it was a sermon that was called Loving Perfectly. You remember that series? That was 2 years ago. And so I just happened to fall right on this one, because it takes the chapter 13 text we've been looking at. We looked at last week, and it's kind of going what love is and how that works. And then the one that I stumbled across was loving perfectly with kindness. And I thought, man, that's a great story that we have for today, because I think 2 years ago I wasn't such a mean person. So it may come across as being, well, that's up to you. So we're just going to where you are with me. So, but anyway, I thought it was appropriate for us, because it was a time that we're trying to learn how we can learn how to do things the way that Christ envisioned our lives to do. And so we're going to kind of look at that. And so I guess to kind of talk a little bit about what love means to love perfectly, is the expectation that God places on each and every one of us. The expectation. The day that we come out of the waters of our baptism, God says to us, you are going to love perfectly, just as I love perfectly. Now, obviously, we're not going to do it from day one. And I think the only time that we truly become perfect is the day that we die. Truly believe that. So from now until the day that we die, we have a lot of work that we need to do. It doesn't matter if you're 4 years old or if you're 104 years old. It is a constant journey to learn and to experience love like none other, but also to express that love like none other. And that is difficult to do, because as we know, as we go through stages of life, and we go through the joys and the trials of life, loving is a difficult thing to do. Loving perfectly is the greatest challenge that you will ever do in your life, bar none. So the question, I guess, is what does perfect love look like? I think for those of us within the Christian faith, love has a face. It has a name. In that face, in that name, is the person of Jesus Christ. And when we listen to the words that he taught, when we see the actions that he did and the way that he treated people, and most importantly, what motivated his actions, and really look into that on a deeper level, almost a daily level would help, that we begin to understand what that looks like and how that looks like. And a lot of times we get trapped up in our feelings, right? We see actions that Jesus did and say, well, I will never be able to do that, because our feeling is a lot of helplessness. I can't ever do that. And I was taught a long time ago, when I was going through another stage of life, that in order to change your feelings, you know what you have to do? Yeah, change your actions. Which means sometimes you just have to force yourself to love differently, to move your actions differently. And eventually, your feelings will catch up to those actions, and then it becomes something that tends to be rather natural. So, there are many times in Jesus when he acted certain ways that he acted out in love. It was not interpreted as love. It was interpreted in less than love. It was maybe even comes across as being rude. And so that doesn't mean he didn't love. It just means he loved, but people didn't see that as love because they didn't know what love looked like. And love in our culture is very hard to understand because it's so closely attached to our feelings. You know, if somebody makes us feel good, we think we're being loved. If someone makes us feel bad, we think we're not being loved. But perfect love really tends to be something that fulfills a deep, deep need in our souls, regardless of how we feel. Regardless of how we feel. I'm going to give you an example of that. Jesus was on his way to Jerusalem. He was in the town of Caesarea Philippi. He was taking a little break with his disciples, getting his head together. He knew what he had to do. He had to go into Jerusalem. He had to make that track. And this is third year in his ministry. 3 is the perfect number, so it had to happen then, right? And so he was in his years of ministry. He knew he had to go to Jerusalem, so he gathers his people around and says, here we go. We're going in for the great Passover in the city of Jerusalem. And everybody in that room knew what was going to happen. There was a hornet's nest. There was a lynch mob that was waiting for him. What would be the easy way to take? Well, let's head to Maui for a few months. That would be my trail. But what did Jesus do? He turns to Peter and he says some magical words. After Peter says, we're not going there, what did Jesus say? Anybody? Yeah. Do you think that hurt Peter's feelings? Bill? Did that hurt your feelings when Sherry calls you that? It's for different reasons, wasn't it? You don't take the trash out or do something, right? So that's going to hurt a lot of people's feelings, right? Why did he call me Satan? That's not nice. So it appears to be a slap in the face to Peter, who was more than likely very embarrassed in front of his peers, right? Now, understand Peter, his motives were great. His motives were pure. He saw danger. Why go into the face of danger? We don't need to be going there. His motives were great. Jesus says those aren't God's motives. Those are your motives, Peter. And we just need to go in this different direction. So he wasn't calling Peter Satan like we would call people Satan. He was saying that's not the ways of God. That we need to go in a different direction. So there is really a fine line between loving perfectly and being rude, right? And we have to understand that difference is because the difference between loving perfectly and being rude is that loving perfectly is a very genuine act, a very intentional act of helping somebody or someone or something to get where they are to where God really needs them to be. Because that is a place where God designed our lives to be, is in this place. Because when we get there and we live there and we act out of there, then it not only makes that person a better person to be around and motivate that person, but you know what else it does? It helps the entire world around us to be motivated and loved and move in the direction of God. That's what perfect love does. It's also the definition of what ministry is. It's just simply helping people from where they are to where God needs them to be. Now, loving perfectly is the most difficult task that we will ever try to accomplish in this world. The Gospels do not try to hide that very fact. It is very straightforward. It is very open. Even in the Gospel of John, when Jesus had gathered a lot of people together, he had become a very popular figure. He had walked throughout the towns. He had stayed with people in Jerusalem. He talked in the gates. And there he began to teach, and hundreds of his disciples or his students were around him. And he began to teach a little bit more, a little bit harder. And then all of a sudden the people start to grumble. And they said, golly, This teaching is difficult. It's difficult. Who could accept it? And because of this, many of his disciples turned back and no longer went about with him. You see what happened? Now, if Jesus was nice, he would say, well, I'm just kidding. Let's just try to be nice to each other, right? He didn't say that. These are the teachings. This is where we try to lead people. You may not think that's the place for you to be, but God put you here. You might be over there, but let's get you to the place where God needs us to be. Yes, they're difficult. You see, churches really struggle with this understanding because what we try to do is we try to keep as many people as we possibly can. And turning people away is a very difficult thing to do. When people leave, people get upset with that. But sometimes those teachings are so hard and such a struggle that people don't understand that we begin to curve and change the purpose of the church in order to make everybody stay. We don't understand that. Loving perfectly, though, is a very genuine and intentional act of helping someone get from where they are to where God needs them to be. That greatly benefits that person, but also benefits the world around them, because that's how we do. We build God's kingdom. Now, Paul's definition of perfect love is this, and we looked at this before. If I speak in tongues of mortals and angels, but if I don't have any love, I am a noisy gong or clanging cymbal. If I have prophetic powers, if I understand all the mysteries and all the knowledge, and I have all the faith in the world, so I can remove mountains, but if I don't have love, I'm nothing. If I give away all my possessions and I hand them over my body so that I may boast, if I don't have love, I've gained nothing. Love is patient. Love is kind. Love is not envious or boastful or arrogant or rude. Love does not insist on its own way. Love is not irritable or resentful. Love does not rejoice in wrongdoing, but love rejoices in the truth. Love bears all things. It believes all things. Love hopes all things. Love endures all things. The focus for us today is love is kind, and it is my favorite one of all because to me it's probably the hardest form of love to master. I think it really is. And here is why. There is this misconception about kindness. It is often mistaken for being nice. That's a misconception. Being kind can come across as being nice, but being kind can also come across as being rude. But rude is also the opposite of love, is it not? Love is not envious or boastful or arrogant or rude. So what's the difference between being nice and being kind? Well, first of all, anybody in the world can be nice. We are always taught to be nice to our friends, right? Always taught to be nice. But being kind comes from God. Kindness comes from God. Kindness is a state of being. Kindness is loving people with the same love that Jesus loved, that motivate by helping someone get from where they are to where God needs them to be, to their place that God created them to be. Everyone except Christians. Everybody expects Christians to be nice. Am I right? Everyone expects Christians to be kind of soft, timid, pushover. But nowhere in Scripture, nowhere in the entire Bible is the word nice ever mentioned. Sometimes kindness comes across as being nice. Sometimes kindness comes across as being rude. because it does not give into what a person wants, right? So calling Peter Satan, was that nice? No, wasn't nice. What about telling the rich man who came to Jesus on how can I inherit the earth? What do I need to do to inherit an earth? And his response to them, just give everything you got and sell everything. Go out and give it to the poor. Was that nice? It was not nice. Then there's this woman at the well. Remember her? Kind of an interesting story. There is a woman that Jesus had never met before. She also represents the enemy of Jesus' people. He was walking across the countryside. He spots this lady at the well all by herself. She's tending water and just kind of sitting there. She was alone. But her body language suggested that she was beaten down by life. And so out of kindness, Jesus appeared to her and offered her an opportunity to live like God intended for her life to be lived. But she had obstacles in her life she could not get past. That was controlling and dictating her life. She couldn't get there. Now, here's my take on this story. This story is briefly put in the Gospel of John. But I want to guarantee you this. Jesus didn't go up there and start giving this lady advice. Didn't throw out the old bullhorn and say, if you want to get to heaven, here's what you better do, and then take off. I would guarantee that Jesus sat down with that woman to get to know her and build that trust relationship with her. I guarantee they sat down together and they had a conversation about life and everything that was going on, and then finally it just happened. In the midst of that conversation, it began to take an interesting twist. And then Jesus says to her, I want you to go and call your husband. Have him come on back. Well, the woman answered, well, I have no husband. And then Jesus says this, you're right. You're right in saying you have no husband. You've had 5 husbands. I think it's my sister who was on that well. And the one that you have now is not your husband. So what you said is truth. Truth is important. So if you're sitting at this place and a stranger comes up to you and suddenly says these types of things, how would you take this conversation? You're meddling, you're judging. What's the motivation, right? And really what it does, it depends on your relationship with that person, am I right? Because too oftentimes we want to give advice to people without even knowing who they are. We don't know the person enough to establish that trust. And secondly, we may not be experienced in our changing of our own hearts, that we have a desire for people to experience the joy that we have found in our relationship with God. Because what people really crave in this earth, what they really crave is genuine concern from each other. What people truly crave is love that is given without any type of conditions upon them. What people crave is not advice from a stranger or some religious person coming to them. What they crave is kindness. Kindness. Now, this story would be completely different if Jesus were nice. Would it not? I want you to think about that for a minute. Would have been completely different. Go get your husband. Well, I don't have a husband. Well, where is he? Well, which one? Awkward, right? All right. Well, look, just have faith. I'll pray for you. Have a cup of cold water. I'm out of here. That would have been the nice thing to do, right? That would have been the complete nice thing to do. But Jesus wasn't motivated by being nice. He was kind, which is different. He was very kind. He was motivated by helping her in a very difficult situation that she was living in to get her out and point her in the direction that she can find true life. And so in a way, Jesus says to her, you're not married. That's true. And you're living with a guy who's not your husband. And if you marry him, he's going to be husband number 6. Is that the direction that you want to go in? Do you see what you're doing here? Do you see the reality of your life right now? You're seeking a love that cannot be found in people. Our souls cannot be satisfied this way, but you keep coming up empty time and time and time again, and you fall into the same trap over and over and over and over again. That cycle thing. Has anybody seen that or felt that or been in that? It's not healthy for you, nor is it healthy for anyone around you. Jesus sincerely wanted her to discover perfect love by seeking God's desire for her life. This was what kindness does. It accepts a person without judgment. It accepts a person without any expectations other than I want to extend to you a cup of water to one who is thirsty with a chance that you just might be ready to drink it. There are no strings attached. There is no hidden agendas. There's kindness that is not intrusive. Kindness is not manipulative. Kindness is not self-serving. Kindness is not a bullhorn shouting at people to get their lives together or God will strike them dead. Kindness is not forcing ourselves on someone until they see things our way. Kindness does not make arguments for God. Kindness does not have to defend God. Kindness is a genuine relationship that's built on trust, built on honesty, so that the one may see the person in themselves that God sees. Kindness is God's love made perfect through our actions, through the grace of God's people who have already discovered God's love in their life and are so eager to share it with people. Love is kind. It is an intentional act of helping people get from where they are in their life and all the obstacles that they surround themselves with and all their dysfunction, and to get them to where God needs them to be in order for their life to be fulfilling, to be meaningful, to be valued, and therefore making the world a better place to live. Better than they ever imagined. And we call that the kingdom of God. And it takes kindness to build it. Let us pray. We lift you up, God, because you are a God that continues to shower us with goodness and mercy. We lift you up, God, because we see ourselves and at times we don't like what you've created. Or perhaps it's we who created this in ourselves. But yet you love us unconditionally. We lift you up because you see things in us that we have yet to see in ourselves. We lift you up because you will continue to believe in who we are as your children. We lift you up because you love us unconditionally. Because you know that if we take you into our hearts and our minds and our souls, that life can be made whole for not only us, but for so many people around us. Let us close our ears to the voices of those that drag us down. And let us open our hearts to the one who created us, molded us into your people. May we believe in that God who continues to live in us and through us and empower us. For it's in your Son's name that we not only pray, that we live, that we breathe, that we have our being.